In childhood development, what we're going to focus on will be three individuals. We're going to compare Erikson, Freud, and Piaget. And it's imperative here that you understand the differences in their theories of childhood development. Erikson, of course, believed that human personality was usually determined by childhood experiences. He thought that what happened to us in every single stage of our lives was basically a crisis, which was the turning point of our stages. His stages go from infancy to basically elderly. So let's review all of the stages for Erikson. Stage 1 has been called trust versus mistrust. So what you have here is a baby who the only way they can communicate with the parents will either be crying or screaming or whatever. So if you have a baby who is constantly getting its needs met, then what do you think that child will develop? The child will develop a sense of trust. Its trust of its caretakers is essential because that will determine later on in its life if it will trust other people. But what if you have an infant whose parents are not there, whose parents are not supportive, whose parents are not attentive, and the child cries and it goes without eating, and the baby cries and it goes without its diapers being changed? Then from the get-go, that infant develops a sense of mistrust. And these are the first two things that are essential, according to Erikson, is whether or not the child develops a sense of trust or mistrust. The next stage for Erikson was autonomy versus shame and doubt. So now you have a child somewhere between the ages of 1 and 3. Now you have a child who's tired of being told what to do, who's tired of being told where to go, who's tired of being told what to wear, what to eat, etc. So the theme of this stage is where the child has a mastery or attempts a sense of mastery over his or her environment. And how does this child do it? By basically saying one simple word, and that is no. So what the child will do here is when you try to do something, go with me here, wear this, eat this, the child will then exhibit its mastery over its own control and will tell you, no, I don't want it, and that's what you're basically going to be facing with. So here is where the child will learn to either become autonomous. So if you allow your child to make decisions and not constantly tell your child what to do, you have a sense of autonomy. If you do not, and you do not allow your child any sense of control over his or her life from this stage on, then what kind of adult will you have in the future? You have an adult who probably questions everything. You have an adult who has shame and doubt. And that's what's essential in this stage. It's autonomy versus shame and doubt. The next stage, stage 3, is initiative versus guilt. So here you have a child who's between the ages of 3 and 5. Basically, you've got some sibling rivalry, you've got some intellectual activity, some motor activity, and there's really not anything that is extremely important in this stage. The next stage, however, is very important, and that's where you have stage 4, industry versus inferiority. Here you have a child between the ages of 6 and 11. So here you have a child who's going to school, who's learning how to read, who's learning how to write, who's learning a whole set of goals. If that child can accomplish them, if that child learns how to read, learns how to write, does well in class, does his homework, and gets good grades, then that child develops what's called a sense of industry, a sense of accomplishment. But what happens if that child doesn't achieve these goals, does have learning problems, doesn't have the ability to read or write or add or subtract like the other children? What tends to happen is a sense of inferiority. And when children have a sense of inferiority, one of the hallmarks that usually occurs is that they're prone to violence. They're prone to behavioral disturbances. For example, in children who have ADHD, they're not doing well in school, they could have a problem with violence. They could have conduct disorder in the future. Children with learning disabilities, children who can't read, who can't write, who can't subtract or add. They're not doing well in class. What are those children prone to do in the classroom? Again, they're going to have behavioral disturbances. Stage 5 is identity versus role diffusion, but it has also been called identity versus role confusion. So what we have here is the preteen and the teenager. It is very important for the teenager to have a sense of identity. They need to fit in. That's why peer pressure is so important. All teenagers look alike. They walk alike. They talk alike. They dress alike. They like the same music. They hang out at the same places. That gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a sense of identity. But if you do not have that, that's where you have the role confusion and the role diffusion. This is where the teenager questions everything. Who am I? What am I? What am I going to do? And of course, sexual experimentation is also very common here. The next stage, stage 6, is intimacy versus isolation. So this is basically from 21 to 40. So this has been called early adulthood. This is where you will determine, do I share my life with someone? Do I live with someone? Do I have a sense of intimacy with someone else? Am I able to be with someone else without the fear of losing myself? That's the sense of intimacy. What if you're unable to do that? What if you're unable to be in relationships? What if you're unable to do so or unwilling to do so because you can't give of yourself and you don't want to? Then you have what's called isolation. And these are the individuals that we all know as the commitment phobics. What happens to individuals who have a fear of commitment? Everybody knows they always stay alone and they end up alone, and that's where this stage is that's what this stage is all about. Either giving your life with someone or being by yourself. As we get older, so now we're in the middle adulthood, we have stage number 7, which is generativity versus stagnation. Generativity means, of course, your sense of accomplishment. Did you set out to do everything that you had thought about? And if you did it, if you did do it, if you did do all your accomplishments, you set your goals and you accomplished them, then you have a sense of generativity. If not, you have a sense of stagnation. If you wake up one day and you're 50 years old and say, wow, I didn't do anything that I had planned in my life, then what could happen? Depression could come in, midlife crises could come in, and that's the sense of stagnation, the fact that you didn't do the things that you set out to do. And that is, of course, leading to the last stage, which is stage 8, integrity versus despair, and that's for the individual who's over the age of 65. Now this, of course, is where you are satisfied with your life. You're happy with the way your life turned out. If you do, then you have a sense of integrity. If you're not satisfied with the way your life turned out, then you have a sense of despair. And this is important because when we think of suicide rates, who is it that kills themselves more than anybody else? The elderly commit suicide more frequently than the young individuals. It could be because of this age. They find themselves, what was the purpose of their life? They have a sense of despair, and this could be one of the leading factors as to why they commit suicide. Now, as far as Piaget, his theories were very different from Erikson. Piaget's theories were more based on how children learn and acquire knowledge. Now, his theories were divided into 4. So his first theory was called the sensory motor stage, which is from birth to about 2 years of age. This is where the child is getting a mastery of the environment. How does he do it? Touching everything, smelling everything, putting everything in their mouths. And by mastering all of their environment, they get a sense of belonging. They can basically control what's going on. By the end of this stage is where you have object permanence, where they understand, they realize that the mother has been internalized, and they know that the mother is not going to go away. So they don't cry when the mother goes away from the room like they were earlier on. Stage 2 is the preoperational stage. Now this is extremely important because there's a lot of issues that are going on in this stage, and this is occurring in children between the ages of 2 and 7. One of the things that's very important is that children are very egocentric. They view themselves as the center of the universe. Everything happens because of them. And because everything happens because of them, if the parents were to get a divorce at this stage, what do the children typically say? They're going to blame themselves. Daddy left because of something I did, or mommy left because of something I did. So they will blame themselves for everything. They also have what's called animism, where inanimate objects have special life. So if you have a 3-year-old riding a tricycle, she falls down, you're going to see her get up, kick the tricycle and say, "Bad tricycle, you made me fall." That's what animism is all about. They also believe that death is reversible. They do not understand the finality of death. So you might hear them say something like, "I understand Grandpa is dead, but when is he going to take me to the park like he promised?" And another thing that they do not understand is what's called the law of conservation. And they have no concept of it whatsoever, and that is something that they develop in the next stage. So if you have a child and you've got 2 containers in your hand, and each container is 8 ounces, the child sees you pour 8 ounces of water into container A, and he sees you pour 8 ounces of water into container B, and even though they hold 8 ounces, container B is tall and thin, whereas container A is short and wide. So because container B looks bigger, which one do you think the child will always assume is a larger object, is a larger container? They will always say that container B is larger than container A because it looks bigger. The third stage is the concrete operational stage, and that's between the ages of 7 and 11. And here what's happening is that they are really trying to change everything that they learned in the second stage. So in the pre-operational stage, where death was reversible, here they understand that death is irreversible. They understand the finality of death, the concept of death, that once you're dead, you are not coming back. And this, of course, is definitely established by the age of 10. Here, they're not egocentric anymore. So if the parents get a divorce at this stage of the game, they are not going to blame themselves. Here, they also have the concept of the law of conservation. So if you see the 10-year-old and he has 2 containers in front of him, each hold 8 ounces, but one appears bigger. If the 10-year-old sees you pour 8 ounces of water into both containers, and you ask that 10-year-old which one holds more water, you would expect the 10-year-old to say they're both identical because they understand the concept of the law of conservation. And finally, the last stage for Piaget is the formal operation stage, which is from 11 on. The hallmark of that stage is abstract thinking. So children over the age of 11 do have the ability to understand abstract thoughts. The next theory will be based on Freud's theories of sexual development. So Freud thought differently from Erikson and from Piaget. That's why his stages were called psychosexual development. So according to Freud, he believed that children were influenced by their sexual drives. So his first stage is the oral stage, which is from birth to about 18 months of age. So what is it about children when they are little? They will get all kinds of pleasure from putting things in their mouth. They're biting, they're sucking, they're licking, and that's where you're getting a lot of the pleasure. This next stage is that we're moving from the mouth to the anus and its surrounding areas. And this one is called the anal stage of development, which is now between the ages of 1 and 3. What's different from the anal stage is that here is where the children are also trying to fight for control. This is where the child also tries to get mastery of his or her environment. It's at this stage where children are toilet trained. If the child is very harshly toilet trained, then what you have is, according to Freud, a fixation in this stage of development. And fixation means nothing more than an arrested stage of development. Whereas regression is that we are going backward in stages of development. So in fixation, you might have an adult who's 30 years old, but yet his characteristics are one pertaining to the anal stage of development. And these are the ones that are called the obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. They're also called anal retentive, or they're also called anally fixated. These are the individuals that are cheap, rigid, perfectionistic. The main theme of the obsessive-compulsive personality disorder is one of control. And that, of course, has to do with this specific stage where the child is trying to get control. The next stage, stage 3, is the phallic stage. And this, of course, is between the ages of 3 and 5. Now here it's not the anus where you're getting the gratification, but it's the genital and its surrounding areas. So here, boys and girls are in love with the opposite sex parent, and their same-sex parent becomes a rival. So when you are in love with your opposite sex parent, that's a concept called Oedipal complex. Now, at the same time, the boys are afraid of losing their penis, so that is called fear of castration, and the girls want a penis, and that's called penis envy. So boys have fear of castration. So they always fear that something horrible will happen to their penis. And why does that occur? One of the reasons that it could occur is that they see the girl without a penis. And because they're still egocentric at this age, what is the only thing that they can think of? Wow, she must have done something that was so horrible that someone cut off her penis. So the children live in fear of that happening to them. Girls, on the other side, might have seen a boy with his penis, and according to Freud, she wants one. So that's what's called penis envy. And at the same time, everyone is in love with the opposite sex parent. And this finally gets resolved in the next stage, which is the latency stage between the ages of anywhere from 5 to 11 to 13. Here is where you have the resolution of the Oedipal complex. Here is where you have the formation of the superego, because here is where we get our conscience. Here is where we get our values. Here is where we get our ethics. And the last stage, according to Freud, of course, was the genital stage, which was capacity for true intimacy.